communicating with you in telepathy,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not words. So then you're left to interpret
Yes.
how they communicated to you, and it's your interpretation, and it's your lens, and it's your values, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Your
right.
filters,
your
right?
filters, everything,
Yeah.
and I'm under the mind that they want that's on purpose. There's something so weird about why it's all left like that, and certain people have different interpretations of experiences, and it seems so strange. And so
You've seen the, you've probably heard about the Jim Peniston, the Rendlesham Forest case.
oh yeah.
He came out with this whole thing about his experience where he received a download and it was all ones and zeros, and then it was interpreted as a message. But in order to turn the ones and zeros into a message, they had to convert it to ASCII, because if it's a binary code, if you break it up into bytes, you can make ASCII characters. And he came up with a message in ASCII characters. But the thing that bothers me about that is, why would the beings use a code like that? I mean, is it because they think that that's something we would understand, or what? It's kind of like, okay, one of the things that I run into, and I actually object strongly to this kind of thinking. People will show photos of the surface of Mars, and they'll say, oh, look, this rock has a message on it.
Right.
And they'll show a word written in like Latin, Roman characters, okay, on the rock on Mars. And, my question is, why would Martians put messages in the Roman alphabet on Mars? That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. So I basically reject all that. But those are only like certain people that like to publish stuff on the internet that's not based on very much real deep thinking. It's very superficial. But that's the kind of thinking that I'm always suspicious of. And I always think, wait a minute, we can't really jump to a conclusion like that. But the Jim Peniston case is, I think Jim Peniston is legitimate. I think he really did have that experience. It's just hard for me to understand how you can just take the binary information and it's translated into something meaningful. I mean, I'm not rejecting it 100%. I just have a hard time really 100% accepting it.
So I get a bit fascinated by this because I think from being an experiencer, the beings that I interacted with, I don't know. I guess there was no beings associated with that fellow's case. I can't remember his full name, Jim, but I know there's no beings associated with that case. But the beings I interacted with knew about humans, and they have way more information than we realize about humans. That's the thing I was a little bit stunned with, and so much so I wasn't interesting to them except for exactly what they wanted to interact with me with. They didn't care about anything else about me, and and I think that there's some there's some crop circles that are definitively very strange and complex, and they have like they have codes in them, and those are codes that humans would like. There are stuff, and so they learned that information and then replicated it in some way. So I find that very strange, and yet possible that the beings very much know human things and then use them as a way of communicating with us.
Yeah, like the one that has encoded in it the number pi.
Right.
You seen that one?
Yeah, I have. Yes.
I mean, that was fascinating. I've been thinking, well, not only is it demonstrably an encoding of the number pi, it's also so complicated. You think, well, who would have thought of that? Coming up with that's weird like pattern that can be interpreted to be the number pi, and when you look at it, it's so definite that you say, well, this couldn't be random. I mean, it's just too definite. All the little details, all, you know, put together, come up with pi.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, I don't know. And it's a circle, of course.
Right. So it could have been humans. We don't. So we're always, and that's what's also interesting about the beings too. They always leave it in this very strange space of us having to interpret it, and we can almost toss some of it off, like, well, it's random, and it's not. There's no way that that was aliens, and so you have a bulk of the population who can easily just toss these things off. It's very, very interesting the way they do it. So.
Well, if you know, and then the ultimate thing though with crop formations is that if someone that really knows about crop formations goes on the site and they can find the right physical characteristics there, they can say, yeah, this is genuinely a crop circle, because the expulsion nodules on the stalks of the plant, what are the balls of, was it ferrite or something in the soil, all that kind of stuff, those things are virtually impossible to replicate using our clunky technology. I know of at least one case where some people tried to replicate a real crop circle using microwave generating equipment and stuff like that. And they were able to approximate a real crop circle. I mean, this is not like, you know, crushing down wheat stalks with boards. This is using, you know, various advanced equipment to generate microwaves and stuff like that. And they were able to do somewhat a decent job of it, but it took them hours, and they made a whole lot of noise and commotion. They had lights, you know, floodlights all over the field while they were doing it overnight. And there's, you know, it was in no way comparable to what happens with genuine crop formations, which is they suddenly appear overnight silently. No one, sometimes people see a UFO hovering. More often they don't see anything, and all of a sudden it's there in the morning. And it's just like, no one heard anything, no one saw anything, and then there's a crop formation there.
And they damage, like legitimately damage farmers' crops, and they and it costs thousands of dollars sometimes in damage.
Oh yeah.
And no one ever gets arrested. No one ever gets caught, and no one ever gets arrested.
Yeah. It was interesting that one back when those two guys from England said, "Oh, it was us. We did it. You know, we went out at night with our rope and board, and they smashed down the crops." And they said, "Oh yeah, well that's fine, but well, how do you explain the ones in Australia and the ones in Canada and the ones in the United States and the ones in, you know, all these other places? Did those guys fly all around the world doing this, or what?"
We did it. I've been there on the cover of Time magazine. Yeah, we did it. Okay, end of story. That's done. That's obviously
We did it all.
Oh.
Well, Tom, one thing I wanted to ask you about is you're talking about abductees have really bad experiences, like Doug we knew here since 2009. He was totally negative, and people with very good experiences like Jeff. My own personal theory. I'm a Buddhist teacher. I think it's it's about the individual, not the aliens. I think it's their karma. Like we've interviewed some experiencers in England. They've had rough lives, some reptilian experience, and also some of them had dark psychic experiences, like negative voices, ghosts, like sort of demonic forces. And there's other people like Jeff, you know, pretty positive experiences. He's never seen a reptilian, doesn't have ghosts in it and bothering him. So I think it's a lot about individual karma. So you don't have to be a good, wonderful, special person to get abducted. All kinds of people get abducted. And also, I think some people might have a near-death experience as a child, or something that just opens them up to other realms and makes them open to this. So I think you get a real range of people with good and bad karmas. That's why some have miserable experiences and some are good. That's just my theory. I mean, I'm not a real ufologist. I thought I'd get your response to that.
Yeah, well, I have nothing to add to that. I mean, to me, that's the open question that I wonder about, and I kind of feel like you know, I guess if you read every book by Bud Hopkins and every book by
David Jacobs?
John Mack and
Oh,
David Jacobs, and really study everything they have to say, Kathleen Martin and people like them, you might start to get a feel for it. But you know, you really, you know, but I don't know that anyone has really written a book that goes straight at that question of why some people have negative experiences and some people have positive experiences. And I'm certainly not qualified to write the book, because I only had a few interviews with people with strange experiences. I mean, I had one lady that I talked to lately. She had a close encounter, but it wasn't really an abduction. It was that, as far as she knows, she just was looking out the hotel window and all of a sudden saw this strange thing go by, and it was really close, and she had a really good look at it, and she's not aware of being abducted, but then she was like so sick, she was nauseated, could barely stand, couldn't sleep. The whole next day she was just wasted with nausea and vomiting and ringing in her ears and migraine headaches, and she had to have her daughter drive her home. And they had gotten to this place in a big 3/4 ton pickup truck that her daughter had never driven before, even though her daughter did have a driver's license and all. She wasn't used to driving this big vehicle. She had to have her daughter drive them home because she couldn't drive. She could barely walk, and she's had like health problems ever since this. But she didn't really have, that she remembers, she didn't have a, you know, face-to-face interaction with anything that you would consider to be alien beings. She just had these tremendous health after effects from a close encounter with an object.
Well, you know, just recently I was watching a video about the Aztec incident. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. It was in 1948.
Yeah.
Sort of where the White Sands base is now. It's in that area.
Yeah, I read the book.
Anyway, what happened was there was 14 beings in that crash. It landed on its side, and the 14 beings were already dead inside inside the craft. And what they figure is that there was really strong radar in that time, and that the radar kind of fried them. So that gives me the idea that sometimes a lot of waves that you can't deal with as a body, you might get really sick. And then if it's another kind that's abducting humans and it's got a ship that's made for that, then you don't get sick. It's just saying that have so much radiation that people get sick. Others, they seem to be able to abduct people, like in Jeff's case. He didn't get sick. He had wonderful experiences. He gets dropped off. Nothing's wrong with him. So other people get enhanced, you know. So that's kind of like where my interest in this lies, is what is going on? Who are all these people that are coming? You know, I mean, the craft are beautiful, but sometimes they're interacting with people. Sometimes it's not just the craft. But I'd be interested, Tom, in what you think the craft are doing here, because you guys basically take reports on the craft, right? So have you developed an idea of why they're here?
Okay, I can't really say, because, you know, I mean, that's still this mysterious aspect of all this stuff.
Yes.
Like I said, it's maddening trying to come up with a pattern. And remember, the vast majority of the reports that we get in MUFON are what we call lights in the sky. If someone sees a light in the night sky that to them seems unusual, and they report it as a UFO. Some of them are satellites. Some of them are aircraft. Some of them are Chinese sky lanterns. And then the ones that we can't explain, those are UFOs, but still, they're a little light in the sky. We may have a photograph, a video, whatever, but it's just a little light in the sky. You don't get a lot of information about the nature of the object there. You don't, a lot of times it's not enough of a picture to see a shape. You don't know if it's a triangle or a disc or whatever. It's just a light. And those could be UFOs, but we don't really know what we're looking at there. And it doesn't add to our knowledge of the phenomenon as a whole. But yeah, and then
Of
we
what
get
they're doing here, yeah.
yeah, and then
They're
we get
there.
you know the black triangles hovering low and going over. I mean, okay, here's a case, and you can let your own imagination run wild with this. One of the cases I investigated, a man is out hiking with his grandson in the mountains here in Oregon on the Pacific Crest Trail. And they stopped and camped overnight by a lake. And the grandson was sleeping in the tent, and the grandfather is sitting out by the fire. And he said he likes to meditate. So he's sitting in his lawn chair or whatever by the fire, and he's doing a meditation. And all of a sudden he starts to get a feeling that there's a presence there. And he opens his eyes and he looks over across toward the lake, and there's this big black triangular object just hovering there. And he was just fascinated. He says, wow, look at that. And he said, as he watched it, occasionally a little bit of a blue discharge, like an electrical discharge, would like kind of dance across the surface of the object. But he said the object was so black, it was like just like a light absorbing black. It was just, it didn't reflect any light or anything. So he had a big like LED flashlight, real powerful, 1,000 candle power beam or whatever, and he aimed it at the object, and he said he was amazed that it didn't reflect any light. It just seemed to absorb all the light. And so, and then he thought, oh, I've got a handgun here. Maybe I should fire around at it and see what happens. And then thought came through his head and said, that's not a good idea. And so he didn't do that.
Oh.
And then he wanted to get closer to it. So he walked over toward it and got to where he was close to being underneath it. And he said that his whole body felt like there was a vibration going through his body. He said he felt like he was at a rock concert standing right in front of a big speaker and, at a really loud rock concert. And his whole body was vibrating from the energy that it was. And he said the energy was so strong, he felt like he was losing control of his bowels and everything. It was just really intense. And so he had to move away to get out of the energy field that made him feel that way. And then he sat back down by the fire and he kept watching this thing for a long time. And I asked him if he had missing time or anything. And he says, and I said, did you see it leave? And he said, he didn't know. He thinks he just went to bed because he waited and waited to see what it would do, and it didn't do anything. So he just went to bed. So I'm thinking that missing time, he just doesn't realize it. But these kind of experiences, when people are telling you about it, that there's a lot of questions that you want to ask. And sometimes you ask the questions, but you can't get a good answer because the person, they just don't know, or they haven't really understood enough to be able to explain it to you. And this is one of those kind of experiences. It's just too deep and hard to understand, and and you run into this all the time, and you've been around this long enough to know some of these people, they're just ordinary, regular working people. This particular guy, he runs a business that sells vaping products. So he's not some like, you know, hippie with the far out like philosophy or anything. He's just a guy that, you know, was out camping with his grandson, and all of a sudden he had this really wild experience. And you run into that all the time. These people just, stuff happens to people and it's inexplicable. And then the other thing that you know, that you've got a whole bunch of people out there who've never talked to anyone about their experiences. And you don't know who they are. You don't know how many of them there are. You just know they're there. And we don't know about them because they're keeping it to themselves. They may have told their closest friend or their significant other or something like that, but they're afraid to tell anyone else because somebody's going to say, oh, you're crazy. Oh, what kind of drugs were you doing? Oh, how much did you drink before that? You know, all of the usual negative stuff that people get hit with when they try to share an experience like that. And so they don't want to share it because they're afraid to talk about it. We don't know how many of them there are. Probably millions. It's amazing.
That black,
really.
That triangle craft that absorbs light is, I had a contact event and I'm taken under the craft, and it's that type of black. It's the type of black that it was so black. All I could say was it's so black. It like camouflaged in the night sky. It was so black. It was a black. It's not even a black car or a black building. It's a black. It's some kind of And I didn't think of it that way. It's light absorbing, and people see them here all the time. And the UFO BC website, there are some fascinating observations of the triangle crafts that you can't see unless there's something in the way. So if someone was like looking out their window and they're looking at the moon, and all of a sudden the moon is covered up by a triangular object. So they couldn't see it until it was covered up, until it was in the light of the moon. Very fascinating. So that's the same style, black, where it just absorbs the light.
Yeah, there's a trade name of a coating. It's called Vanta black, VANTA.
Oh yeah.
It's a kind of a paint that's used like on military aircraft to, you know, make them harder to see because it doesn't reflect any light or minimally reflects light. And one of my witnesses described that saw a triangle, a black triangle. That's what he described it as. He said it was like Vanta black. I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up.
Right.
Because say, what is he talking about, Vanta black? And then I found it on the internet and it says, oh yeah, it's a real thing. And that was his explanation of it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I could ask a question. I'm interested in asking about the grays. We haven't discussed the grays. This almost ubiquitous. Everybody in the street, go to the store, people know what grays are. And so many people have experienced them. They seem to be, of course, in the abduction process, like David Jacobs says, this goes back to the late 1800s, this ongoing genetic modification of mankind is an ongoing program. This is a very big deal in terms of humanity and the entire future of the world. So can you comment on your view on the grays, Tom?
Oh boy. All I can say is it's one of the most classic body types that people describe when it comes to these supposed alien beings. And, you know, I'm so non-committal about it, honestly. I'll use the term alien, but I don't know whether they're from another planet. I don't know where they're from. They could be future humans that travel back in time for all I know. But yeah, we can say aliens. They're probably the most commonly, you know, I mean, if someone wants to draw a picture of an alien face, they're going to draw a face that looks kind of like one of the grays. They might not get the color right. They might make it green, but still, you know what it is when you see it, with the big black eyes and the very small, almost non-existent nose and the lips, the mouth that's just like a line, basically, lips, very small chin, bulbous head. usually no hair or very little hair. I don't know. I mean, it's I guess you could call it an archetype or something. It's a typical, you know, typical picture of the gray, but honestly, I don't know a whole lot about them. One thing I would say, and I think this comes from a lot of different things in the literature, that often when there's a group of these beings working together, they often operate more like hive insects, in a sense that they all have their job to do and they just do it. They know what to do. You don't, like if you had a bunch of humans working together in a laboratory or something, and they were talking about their work, they would be telling one another things about what steps to do in a process, or sharing information of, oh, I just did the test on this and the answer is that, right? And they'd be sharing this information verbally with one another. But these beings just seem to do their job without talking. Now, maybe it's because it's telepathic and they know what to do, but it's almost like, you observe beehives or ant nests or termites or whatever, and each one of the workers has a job to do and they just do it. They all do it together and they don't talk about it, or at least not in a language we understand. Maybe they do it by chemical secretions. Maybe they do it by telepathy. When you think ants have telepathy, I don't know, but they just do what they're supposed to do, right? And that seems to be, in some stories I've read, the way these grays behave. But then there'll be one who's kind of like the boss. And if somebody like Betty Hill, for example, if she's having an interaction with the beings, like, let us say the beings in her case were grays, because I think they're probably a good example of that. The one that she interacted with was the one she thought of as being the captain or the head of the group. He was the leader, or the boss, basically. And he's the one she interacted with. She didn't interact with the others. They were just doing whatever was they're supposed to do. When they were doing their weird medical tests on her, procedures, whatever, they were just doing their job. And only this one had any sort of interaction with her. And this is the type of thing you see in a lot of these cases. I have a hard time really going beyond that and trying to interpret it, other than just relating, the experience that in this case, Betty Hill perceived it as being the way she described it. And then you of course, you've read probably Whitney Strieber's books called the Secret School. Is that what it's called? What's it called?
Secret School, isn't it?
Yeah, is that what it's called? Okay. I lived in San Antonio, Texas, and there are places that he describes in that book that I was familiar with. And it was really weird, because all those places were places that grabbed my attention when I was living there. And I was like I lived there from age 10 to age 16. And I have at least somewhat of an emotional reaction to his description of some of these places, because I myself had been to those places and had some sort of emotional connection with those places. And it's really weird. But he talks about an old house in downtown San Antonio that has a dome on top, like an observatory dome. I remember that house. It was right across the street from the Civic Auditorium. And when we go to the auditorium on school outings, like field trips, where we go to a concert or something, they'll load us all in school buses, drive downtown. We go to hear like Peter and the Wolf, I think was one we saw. I remember seeing that house over there with that dome, that had a little tower with a dome on top. And was fascinated by the house. And the other place he talks about is, I think it was called Olmos Park, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember playing there with my brothers and sisters, going back in the woods. And when I say woods, these were these weren't big trees. These were little trees, maybe an inch or two in diameter, that were very thick. And it was just like a thicket of these trees. And all around the there were little creeks and waterways. It was kind of like a wetland. And we played back there, and we try to catch crawdads and all that kind of stuff. And that's one of the places he talks about going to and having these sessions with the nuns that were really aliens with nun habits on and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, his books were fascinating. I don't know how I got on the subject, but it had to do with the trying to understand the grays and all that. He talks about the grays a lot because those are the kind of beings he interacted with. So I don't know. It's all a mystery. I mean, I don't know anything really.
Carry on.
Just for the record, I actually witnessed a gray alien command or communicate with a human, but I've also, that's an interesting observation. I never thought that between them, I never seen them communicate or talk or give instructions or anything. Yeah, that's interesting. You made me observe that, but I have seen one do it with another humanoid, like a alien humanoid that they were with, and they communicated with them.
Telepathy.
It was through telepathy. Yeah, it was through telepathy, but it was,
Right.
he was like, do you want to do this? And he was asking the humanoid alien that was there, and the humanoid alien said, yeah, well, I'll do that. And he kind of agreed, but it was just a very interesting observation on your behalf. And I had to admit that I've never thought of it like that. And it was very cool.
But Jeff, were they actually talking with their lips, or was that telepathy?
No, you're right. All telepathy. I watched two beings I could feel were having telepathy between each other. Yeah, it was really weird. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. So many stories I've read. I'm often very fascinated with the Travis Walton case. I've met Travis and I've talked to him several times. He's a really fascinating person, and one of the things that's fascinating about him is he's just such a regular guy. I mean, he's not like, consumed with an ego trip or anything. He's just a regular guy, and he really doesn't like publicity. He kind of like ended up feeling like he really had to be somewhat public and go out and tell his story because people were getting weird ideas from that movie, the original movie Fire in the Sky that was based on his story. They really fucked it up when they got to the part about the actual alien contact experience on board the ship. They went total Hollywood on him and didn't really represent what he said happened to him, which was really a shame. And I think that kind of motivated him to come out and start trying to tell people his version of it. But he's just a regular guy, and he and I agree, and I'm not the only one, I think, that understands this. He says he thinks that what happened to him was accidental, that because he was he rashly jumped out of the truck and ran over, got too close to this object, and he got zapped by some kind of electrical discharge from the ship. It was an accident. They didn't mean to hurt him. But since he got knocked out and perhaps killed, they picked him up and saved his life.
He's on Joe Rogan's podcast saying that he also it could be possible that it wasn't even a discharge from the craft, that it was something electric. I guess the spot where it happened too is well known for lightning strikes, and that there may have been like some kind of electrical current in the land, and then when he showed up and the UFO showed up, it kind of charged between the three, and And then so even that was even more of an accident. There wasn't even a shooting from the laser from the UFO. So
Yeah, well, that's possible too. Although Mike, you know, an eyewitness, his friend Mike, who drew the painting of what happened, clearly shows the discharge of, you know, electricity or lightning or whatever coming from the object or between him and the object.
Right.
And then Travis being like knocked backward, but that's the way it looked to him. I don't know, but then the other thing you can say, and this is true of lightning physically, is that people often think of the lightning coming from the cloud to the ground. But in fact, if you look at slow motion pictures of lightning, it almost always goes from the ground to the cloud.
Yeah.
Then there's other lightning between clouds, but it typically goes from the ground to the cloud when it's, you know, between the clouds and the ground.
Right.
And
he wasn't saying that the lightning strike. Right. I want to clarify that. He wasn't saying that it was a lightning strike, but that there was an electrical current between the three of them, and that he was acting as a grounding, and then it fired at him through electrical current.
And that's kind of the what I was trying to get at before. I mean, he got close to the object when it was powering up, perhaps to take off, and somehow the electrical current, you know, hit him, static or whatever, knocked him down, perhaps killed him. And he feels that it's very possible they actually rescued him, saved his life, or brought him back to life. And
I want to comment on that. When he regained consciousness, he grabbed this like a glass sort of vial, and he threatens them with it after they save his life. You know, he's threatening like this, and then no, they decided to send him back to Earth. What if they thought, you know, we can't work with this guy, just bring him back? Maybe could have gotten a job or stayed with them or been abducted and been a part of their society. And they decided we can't work with this guy, or were they going to bring him back anyways, like just to save his life?
Well, I think they were trying to save his life. I mean, once he jumped off the table and started threatening him, they figured, oh, he's alive, right?
But
the thing that's funny is he picked up that thing and he thought it was a glass test tube, and he tried to break it and it wouldn't break.
Wouldn't break, yeah. He threatens them.
It was made of something else.
They didn't seem very impressed. He's grace to just stand, walk away. Not
well, I think he started acting threatening, and they said, well, we might as well just get out of the way here. He apparently he knew Taekwondo or something, so he was trying to use some of his martial arts moves on him.
He said on video that when he was kind of waving it away, they all got together, the gray aliens, they raised their hand, and he said I guess they were trying to do some kind of mind thing on him. Oh. And he said it was the most terrifying moment of his life, was they all collectively got together and tried to do something on his mind. And it was so terrifying what was going on to him. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Another part of a story that I found very interesting was when after the beings left the room and left him alone, and he starts wandering around. He ends up in the central, what looked like the central control room of this object, this ship or whatever. And he sat down in the chair and started playing around with apparently the control. And he started seeing that when he saw stars through the ceiling, if he did something with the pad on the arm of the chair, the stars moved. So he said, oh, looks like I'm making something happen here. And that kind of freaked him out, because he said, I don't know what I'm doing. So, you know, I probably shouldn't do this. And then right after that is when the what do they call them? Venusian beings, the Nordic
kind of blonde hair, blue eyes, right?
Right.
Yeah, Nordics.
And they escorted him down the ramp and promptly knocked him out with some sort of thing over his nose and mouth. That's quite a story. I'm fascinated with it.
He was gone for 5 days, right?
Yeah.
He was gone, like he was one of the abductees that has been gone for more time.
Probably the most famous
I think
case.
That was probably because they were healing him.
Well, that's what I think, that they had to do something to bring him back to life, and then, but his only conscious memory was from when he woke up in the room and what was like an operating table or whatever, with the beings around him, and then he freaked out. And then after the Nordics took control of him and they knocked him out, he was unconscious again, and he woke up lying in the middle of the road. So it's really hard to figure out, all right, all the parts that he doesn't remember of those 5 days, were they before or after the part that he remembers? Who knows? I don't know. It's really kind of tricky.
Have you ever asked him if he continues to do regressions to get at the missing pieces?
I haven't asked him that, and I have not asked him that, but I could probably guess that he doesn't do any more of that.
No more.
I don't think so.
Mhm.
I think he's trying to get back to normal, if you will, as much as possible, considering all that he's gone through.
Right.
But I'd have to ask him, honestly. I'd have to ask him that question directly. Hopefully I'll get to see him again. Maybe he'll show up at a MUFON symposium.
He's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was at the MUFON symposium about 3 years ago.
He takes breaks from public appearances.
Yeah. He was at the McMinnville thing here in Oregon, and it was really scary because he passed out on stage. He was talking. I think he was done with his speech. He was doing questions and answers, and somebody asked him a question, and he was up there, and he just fell over, just passed out.
Wow.
And fortunately, there were people right on the spot that jumped into action and went and checked on him. He decided that he had was dehydrated, and he'd been eating some salty snacks and hadn't had enough water to drink, and he just got got a real, I don't know, like low blood pressure or something, just passed out. So I don't know, he was okay shortly after that, but we were pretty worried. I mean, people freaked out. We had like 300-400 people there in the audience and watching him, and he just fell over, and everyone went, like, my God, what happened to Travis?
Kidding.
He was okay though. Yeah.
Wow.
Funny, my chief investigator was with me, and he's a nurse practitioner, and when this happened, he jumped up and ran around there to the stage to see what he could do to help.
I'm really interested in
What's that?
In the MUFON conferences, actually, Tom, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, like, that sounds really interesting, the kind of guests that you have and stuff.
Well, we had
Put
all
in a
kinds
little
of
plug
people.
for MUFON.
The last one I went to, because it was canceled last year, but the year before, we had Paul Hynek, who is J. Allen Hynek's son, and we had I can't remember enough to really talk about them. A lot of times it's kind of a overload on the mind just listening.
Yes.
I couldn't do it justice really, but the only time I really was not happy with the MUFON symposium was a few years ago. We got too many of the people that were on a really extreme wild end of things, like
Corey Good. Have you ever met Corey Good, Tom? Oh, have you ever seen Corey?
Yeah, Corey Good, and those kind of people. And we have a guy that lives around here, who has this story. Trying to remember his name now. It's not coming to me at the moment, but he has some story about being a time traveler where he jumped through some sort of a portal and went from New Jersey to New Mexico in 10 seconds, and also traveled through time. Right. And he's told this story over and over again, and it keeps adding new weird details to it. I at first when I heard them, I thought, yeah, maybe true, but after all these years hearing all the different versions that he's told, I decided, no, it's not true. But anyway, we had, that one year we had all the people like that, and it created a big uproar in MUFON because there's a lot of very scientifically oriented people in MUFON, and some of them are really good. I mean, and I'm not saying they're overly skeptical or too much into nuts and bolts or anything. In fact, these are some of the most smartest people in MUFON. A lot of them just quit after that. They left the organization because they didn't think that we should be hosting a symposium with people like that as speakers. But MUFON made a lot of money that year because it was in Las Vegas, and that's easy travel from Southern California. And there's a lot of really wild-eyed people in Southern California. They're MUFON supporters, and they all paid, they all signed up for this, and MUFON raked in a lot of money that year. But my feeling is, yeah, great. So we made more money, but at what price? Because I was really sorry to see some of these people go, because they were some of the top-notch investigators and analysts in MUFON. So I hope we never do that again. It wasn't my idea. That's for sure.
Yeah, you want to keep sort of on the science side, right? Like,
yeah, and when it comes to science, there's all kinds of science, but the way I express it is we do rational inquiry into UFO subject.
yes,
You want to
right.
base it in some sort of reasoning. You're looking for evidence, not just wild-eyed conspiracy theory stuff that has no basis in any observable information. So that's the way I try to do it. That's why I say when I get a UFO report, first thing I do is collect all the data I can. I look up the weather, I look up the GPS coordinates, I read the report and decide what kind of other input I need. Do I need to look up satellites? Do I need to look up any other astronomical information? Do I need to look for meteors or fireballs or whatever? And then I document all the stuff that's relevant. That's because you don't just make a decision on the spur of the moment. You gather the information first, and then you put it all out there in front of you and try to talk to the witness, try to assess their credibility. How do you feel about them? Do they seem like they're being sincere? And usually I don't make judgments about the witnesses unless I really feel a strong feeling that they're not trustworthy for one reason or another. And it's not necessarily that the person is intentionally being deceptive. Sometimes it's because I think the person is behaving irrationally. They're like, all over the place. I had a guy a few months ago that was so weird to deal with. It's like he was continually changing phone numbers, and his communication with me is all fragmented. I try to contact him and he wouldn't answer me for a day or two, and then he'd come back with all extreme stuff like, oh my God, they're trying to get me, and they're breaking into my apartment and blah blah blah. And it's all like really extreme reaction to everything. And those kind of people, I can't work with them. I mean, it's not, you just can't communicate on a rational level with someone like that. And I ended up closing the case. I think I called it insufficient data because the guy was you can't get information that you can base a conclusion on when you can't have a rational conversation with the witness. It just, it just doesn't work. So,
right. A lot of people really get overwhelmed with paranoia.
Yeah,
You know, when they first start looking into these things that have happened, then
that's
they
right.
get a lot of paranoia, and that really
And it-
that really can taint a testimony, right?
right. And so MUFON has, and we don't have a choice about this. There's just certain conclusions we can draw. And one of them is, you know, the identification category, which is IFO, which means identified flying object, natural phenomenon, or man-made object, or other. And other can be something else, but you've got to describe what it is. Okay, what is the other that you say that this thing was identified as? Another solution is unknown. There's two kinds of unknown. Unknown UAV, unidentified aerial vehicle. That means the object looked like a craft of some sort. It was a triangle, or it was a disc, or it was a sphere with a defined shape, or it was a chevron shaped object, like the, forget what
That
it's
was the
called.
Phoenix Lights in March
Phoenix
1996.
lights. Yeah, that was like a
Kilometer
well,
across or
it
mile.
was like a chevron shape. Okay,
Yeah.
those are UAV, a vehicle of some sort, or unidentified other. That could be just a light in the sky, or could be a blob of some sort, something that's not defined as a structured, obvious structured object. And then after those categories, the decision has got to be either hoax, and there's two kinds of hoaxes. Either a keystroke hoax, in other words, someone just made up a story and they posted it, or a more elaborate hoax, an actual staged hoax, a fake photograph, for example, or here's a good one. This actually happened. A guy submitted a photo of a disc-shaped object, and he said that he was a river rafter. He was a river guide that guided people down the river. And one of the people that was on his boat had seen this thing, and they took photographs of it. It was like a disc hovering behind the trees on the left bank of the river. And I tried to communicate with him about it, and I didn't hear anything for a few days. And then finally he got back to me. He says, "Oh, I've solved the case." I said, "Oh, really? How's that?" He beached his boat on the left side, and he walked over there, and he found out somebody had taken one of those old fashioned satellite dishes. Remember the really big satellite dishes? They'd taken one of those and they welded it to a post and stuck it behind a bunch of trees, so you couldn't see it very well, but it was just like hovering behind the trees. So it looked like a flying saucer
Right.
hovering behind the trees.
Yeah.
Someone had intentionally put that there to get people to think it was a flying saucer. And so that's a hoax. It's a staged
Right.
hoax, but
Right.
I didn't accuse the person that reported it of the hoax. I just said it was a hoax, and this guy, you know, solved it basically because he figured out what it was.
Right. Right.
And I get very few hoaxes, honestly. And when it is a hoax, I can usually tell right away because of the way the person behaves, the way they
I
talk
think that's
about their
important, Tom.
experience.
I think it's
Right?
important to point out that you get very few hoaxes. I think that's human nature. People don't go around hoaxing. I mean, there's like a million sightings reported since 1947, meaning there could be 20 or 50 million. There's probably few people that would bother trying to hoax this, meaning most sightings are authentic. Yeah.
You know what they do hoax? They hoax videos. People love to hoax videos.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
YouTube's
Find the
got
most
3 new ones
hilarious
every
things.
day.
Right.
And I
Alien
Photoshop.
behind the tree and stuff
Oh,
like
yeah,
that. You know.
I get very few of those.
Yeah.
They just don't get reported to MUFON. The people put them on the internet, yeah, YouTube, whatever, but that's not a report I care about, so I don't look at that. But
So,
the other categories are insufficient data, and that's where I just don't have enough to work with, either because the person won't communicate with me, or stops communicating with me, or even though I can communicate with the person, their information just doesn't work out. You know, they're too scattered. They don't either they, because of mental illness or inability to express themselves well, they can't tell me enough about the case. And then the final category is what we call information only. And that's where it really doesn't add up to a UFO case we can do anything about. I had a guy one time, he reported that he was watching a video of or rather it wasn't a video, it was the webcam in Antarctica. And that he said the webcam showed a portal opening in the ice in Antarctica. And I looked at that case and I said, well, how am I supposed to verify this? Can you show me the video? And he says, no, I don't have the video. It's a live webcam. And you can go back and look at the same webcam now, but it doesn't show the same thing. And I close that as information only. It's not really a case I can do anything with. It's not a real UFO case.
Yeah.
You know, so you just say, no, it's not even worth investigating. You just close it. And that's it. We don't have a category for nut job or mentally ill or anything like that. There's no real category for that. So those are set in stone. Those are the and actually MUFON has expanded that a little bit over the years, but still those are basically the only categories you have for closing a case, for making a decision as to what, you know, the disposition, we call it disposition on a case.
So I have two more questions. I'm being a question hog here.
Only two?
One question that I had that just spurred my interest. I wondered if you'd investigated the Phoenix lights, if you'd actually done that one. And the other one is, since MUFON is a big organization and you're the director and everything, when you send people out, well, the director of Oregon, right?
Yeah.
In Oregon. So when you send people out, do you guys have a budget like for gas and for cameras? And do you send people out with equipment? And are you like that?
We have money for those things, and I have made it available, but people usually they really don't need it. Here's the problem. Well, right now nobody's going anywhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so almost all of the investigative work we do is by email, telephone, and text message and stuff like that. And this was true even before the pandemic, because, you know, it's a big waste of time to drive all over the place, you know, for no good reason. And so really the only time that we really go out in the field physically is if there's something about the location that we have to check out. Like someone says there was a landing and there might be debris or landing impressions or something like that, and we want to see that.
Or a crop circle, I guess.
Or a crop circle. Or if there's a situation where it's really hard to visualize the location because the person can't really describe it that well. And so we need to go there and do some measurements or something. That's the only time that we really go to a site. I only in a few cases have I actually gone out to a site. Almost always it's just done by email and so forth. And even though I have made money available from our donations to people for equipment and stuff, people really haven't used it that much. I've spent some money on some software and things, some software tools that I use for analysis. And I bought a set of voice recorders a while ago and gave them to some of my investigators, but that was before cell phones became so popular. And then everyone has a voice memo feature on their mobile phone, so nobody really needs that anymore. And as far as cameras and stuff,
so good. Even the cameras,
yeah,
are
people
so
have
good.
cameras on their phones, and you know, people, you know, if you want to get a really good camera, I mean, that's a lot of money. I don't have a budget to spend, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 on a digital SLR. So, you know, I mean, I personally, if I wanted to buy one for myself, I have the money, but I don't have that kind of money in the budget for the organization. So, you know, but that's, I mean, if we had a big case where we had to travel down to some remote place in Oregon and go do an overnight trip somewhere, yeah, I'd spring money out of the budget for gas and hotel or whatever. I would do that if we needed to, but it just hasn't come up. We just haven't needed to.
Okay. So the other part of that question was, did you go out to do the Phoenix lights?
No.
Because it's not in your area, right?
Yeah, it's not in Oregon, it's in Arizona.
Okay.
And
So
when did that happen? See, I wasn't Oregon State Director till 2001, and that happened in what, 96, 97, something like that?
1997 in March.
Yeah, March 97.
I remember that.
Yeah.